There are stories that begin with explosions. Some begin with discoveries. And some begin with a question. How do you hide an airplane? Not behind clouds. Not at night. Not underground. But in the open sky. Because for nearly a century, radar could find almost anything that flew. A bomber. A fighter. Even a flock of birds. Yet somehow, someone built an aircraft that could slip through the world's most advanced defenses. Almost like a ghost. This is the story of the impossible. Long before people talked about stealth aircraft, there was another airplane that inspired mystery. Pilots rarely saw it. Civilians almost never did. When people looked into the sky, they sometimes reported a strange object moving faster than anything they had ever seen. Some thought it was a UFO. Others believed it was secret alien technology. The truth was already extraordinary. Its name was the State Route 71 Blackbird. Built during the Cold War, it could fly higher than 85,000 feet. Higher than most aircraft could even dream of reaching. It could fly faster than 3 times the speed of sound. So fast that if a missile was launched toward it, the crew's first response was often not to dodge, but simply accelerate. It wasn't invisible. Far from it. It relied on speed, altitude, and remarkable engineering. But while the Blackbird was rewriting the limits of flight, a different group of engineers was quietly asking an even more unbelievable question. What if speed was no longer enough? Historical note for production: the State Route 71 was a highly secret aircraft during its early operational years, and some sightings likely contributed to UFO reports. However, many UFO reports remain unexplained and should not be attributed to the State Route 71 alone. To understand why stealth was created, we have to travel back to one of the most dangerous periods in human history: the Cold War. 2 superpowers, thousands of nuclear weapons, and one enormous problem. Nobody trusted anyone. Every military wanted the same thing: to know what the other side was doing. Were missiles being moved? Were bombers preparing for takeoff? Were troops gathering near the border? Information became more valuable than gold. Whoever saw first could react first. And that meant survival. So the sky became a battlefield. Not with bullets, but with something invisible. Radio waves. Imagine standing in a dark cave. You clap your hands. A moment later, you hear the echo. Even without seeing anything, the echo tells you something is there. Radar works almost the same way. Instead of clapping, it sends out radio waves. When those waves strike an airplane, some of them bounce back. The radar receives that tiny echo, and suddenly, the invisible becomes visible. For decades, that simple idea worked astonishingly well. If an airplane was in the sky, radar could usually find it. Engineers responded the only way they knew how: build faster airplanes. Build stronger airplanes. Fly higher. Carry more fuel. Carry more weapons. But every improvement created another problem. Radar kept getting better. For nearly 30 years, the race never changed. Aircraft became faster. Radar became stronger. Aircraft became faster again. Radar became stronger again. It seemed like an endless cycle. Until one engineer asked a question so strange. Most people thought it was impossible. What if, instead of outrunning radar, you simply gave radar nothing to see? That question would change aviation forever. For decades, the rules of air combat seemed impossible to escape. Build a faster airplane. The enemy builds a better radar. Fly higher. The radar reaches higher. Carry more weapons. The enemy builds faster missiles. It was a race with no finish line. Every breakthrough was eventually matched. Then, someone asked a question so simple, it almost sounded foolish. What if the problem wasn't the airplane? What if the problem was the reflection? Imagine standing in front of a mirror. Shine a flashlight straight at it. The light comes straight back. Now, tilt the mirror. The flashlight hasn't changed. The mirror hasn't disappeared. But the light goes somewhere else. What if an airplane could do the same thing? Not disappear. Just send the radar signal somewhere else. It sounded impossible. But impossible ideas have changed the world before. Thousands of kilometers away, behind the Iron Curtain, a scientist sat at his desk. His name was Pyotr Ufintsev. He wasn't designing fighter jets. He wasn't building secret weapons. He was simply trying to understand how radio waves behaved when they struck objects with sharp edges. His work was highly mathematical, difficult to read, almost impossible for most people to understand. When he finished, he published it, and almost nobody paid attention. No headlines, no celebration, no secret military parade. Just another technical paper, placed on a shelf. Sometimes, history changes quietly. Historical note: Pyotr Ufintsev's published work on electromagnetic diffraction later became influential in stealth design. The exact extent of its role is still discussed by historians, but it is widely recognized as an important contribution. Years passed. Across the ocean, inside Lockheed, a small group of engineers searched for an answer. Radar kept improving. Missiles kept improving. Speed alone would not be enough forever. Then, someone discovered a translated copy of Ufintsev's paper. At first glance, it looked like ordinary mathematics. Pages of equations, symbols, diagrams. Nothing about it suggested that it might change aviation forever. But one engineer saw something different. If these equations were correct, maybe, just maybe, they could predict exactly how radar waves bounced off an airplane. Not after it was built. Before it was built. It was an extraordinary thought. Instead of guessing, you could calculate. There was just one problem. The mathematics worked, but the computers did not. Imagine throwing one tennis ball at a wall. Easy. Now imagine throwing 10,000 tennis balls. Every ball bounces differently. Now calculate every bounce by hand. That was impossible. Early computers simply weren't powerful enough. But by the 1970s, computers were becoming faster. For the first time, engineers could simulate thousands of radar reflections before building an aircraft. The dream was beginning to look real. Some ideas stay inside laboratories. Others escape into history. Lockheed's engineers believed they had found something extraordinary. Now, they had to prove it. Not with words. Not with equations. But with an airplane. One unlike anything the world had ever seen. Small. Angular. Almost alien. Its existence would remain secret. Its name was Have Blue. And if it failed, the dream of stealth might disappear forever. There are places where history is written. Not with headlines, but behind locked doors. In the Nevada desert. Hidden from satellites. Hidden from the public. A small team of engineers walked into work each morning, knowing that almost nobody would ever know what they were building. They weren't trying to make the fastest airplane. They weren't trying to carry the biggest bomb. They were trying to answer a question that many experts believed had no answer. Can an airplane hide from radar? When the first prototype was revealed, it didn't look futuristic. It didn't look beautiful. It looked broken. Like someone had folded an airplane out of black cardboard. Sharp edges. Flat panels. Strange angles. No smooth curves. One engineer even joked that it looked like it had been designed by someone who had never seen an airplane before. But every strange angle, every flat surface, existed for one reason: to fool radar. Let's perform a simple experiment. Imagine you're holding a flashlight, and I'm standing across the room. If you shine the light directly at a mirror, the light reflects straight back into your eyes. It's bright. Impossible to miss. Now, tilt the mirror just a little. The mirror hasn't disappeared. But suddenly, the light misses you completely. Radar behaves in a surprisingly similar way. It sends out invisible radio waves. If those waves bounce straight back, the radar says, "There it is." But if the waves are scattered away, the radar receives only a tiny echo. Not magic. Not invisibility. Just geometry. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about stealth aircraft. They are not invisible. If you stood on the runway, you would see one. If another pilot flew close enough, they would see one too. The goal was never to disappear from human eyes. The goal was to delay detection. Imagine playing hide and seek. Your opponent isn't blind. You simply stay hidden long enough to complete your mission before you're found. In modern warfare, sometimes a few extra minutes can change history. As strange aircraft began flying over the Nevada desert, rumors spread. Truck drivers spoke of silent black shapes crossing the night sky. Campers claimed they saw triangles with strange lights. Some believed the government had recovered alien technology. Others whispered about a place called Area 51. To this day, Area 51 remains one of the most famous military facilities in the world. Many stories surrounding it have never been verified. But one thing is certain. Secret aircraft were tested in the deserts nearby. And when people catch only a brief glimpse of something decades ahead of its time, their imagination often fills in the rest. Historical note. This scene distinguishes between documented facts, classified aircraft testing near Area 51, and speculation, alien technology, which is important for credibility. Finally, the calculations were finished. The engineers had made their choice. There was only one thing left to do. Fly it. If the mathematics were wrong, years of work would collapse in a single afternoon. If they were right, the future of air combat would never be the same. In the silence of the Nevada desert, the strange little aircraft rolled toward the runway. The world didn't know it yet, but aviation was about to change forever. Every great invention has a moment when it leaves the drawing board and enters the real world. This was that moment. Hidden in the Nevada desert, far from public eyes, a small aircraft waited at the end of the runway. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't elegant. But if the engineers were right, it could rewrite the rules of air combat. The pilot pushed the throttle forward. The aircraft gathered speed. Faster! Faster! Then, it lifted into the sky. For the first time in history, an airplane designed from the beginning to defeat radar was flying. The early test flights were encouraging. The strange shape behaved better than many had expected. More importantly, the radar measurement suggested the idea worked. But pioneering new technology rarely comes without a price. During testing, both blue prototypes were eventually lost in separate accidents. One suffered a landing gear problem. The other developed a mechanical issue that forced the pilot to eject. Both pilots survived. Years of work reduced to twisted metal. To an outsider, it might have looked like failure. But the engineers saw something very different. The aircraft had done exactly what it was built to prove. The F-117 Nighthawk. Although many people called it a fighter, its true role was precision attack. It was built to do something that once seemed impossible: fly through heavily defended airspace, strike important targets, and escape before the enemy fully understood what had happened. Every line, every panel, every angle had a purpose. Not to impress spectators, but to confuse radar. In 1991, the world watched as coalition forces launched Operation Desert Storm. Iraq had one of the most extensive air defense networks in the region. Surface-to-air missiles, radar stations, anti-aircraft guns. It was exactly the kind of environment stealth had been designed for. Night after night, F-117s flew deep into defended airspace. They struck command centers, communication hubs, and other strategic targets. The aircraft demonstrated that reducing radar detection could allow missions that would have been far more dangerous for conventional aircraft. Around the world, military planners were paying attention. The age of stealth had truly arrived. Success created a new myth. Some people believed stealth aircraft were untouchable, invisible, impossible to defeat. Reality was more complicated. In 1999, during the Kosovo conflict, an F-117 was shot down by a Serbian air defense unit. It shocked the world. But it also revealed an important truth. Stealth was never a magic cloak. It reduced the chances of detection. It did not eliminate them. Clever tactics, persistence, and a little luck could still make a difference. Engineering changes the odds. It doesn't erase them. Historical note: the downing of an F-117 remains one of the best-known examples showing that stealth reduces detection but does not make an aircraft impossible to find or engage. The story did not end with the F-117. Engineers kept learning. Computers became thousands of times more powerful. Aircraft evolved. The B-2 Spirit, the F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Lightning II. Their smooth curves may look very different from the sharp angles of the early stealth aircraft. But they all share the same goal: control how radar waves scatter. Hide just long enough to complete the mission. The impossible idea had become standard engineering. For thousands of years, humanity has played the same game. One side builds a shield, the other builds a better sword. Castles became cannons. Cannons became armor. Armor became missiles. Missiles became stealth. Every invention inspires another. The race never ends. It simply changes shape. More than 30 years after the first stealth aircraft proved an impossible idea, a new generation of stealth would face a very different test. Not inside a secret desert base. Not during a flight trial. But in the skies above the Persian Gulf. According to the US Air Force's account, An American MQ-1 Predator drone was flying a routine mission. Then, two Iranian F-117 fighters began closing in. The Phantom was a veteran of the Cold War. Fast. Powerful. Still respected decades after its first flight. But unknown to the Iranian pilots, someone else had already arrived. Retired U.S. Air Force General Mark Welsh later described what happened next. According to his account, the F-22 approached the Iranian fighters without being detected. He said the American pilot flew beneath them, close enough to visually inspect their aircraft, even checking whether they were carrying weapons. The Iranian pilots reportedly continued flying, apparently unaware that another fighter was only a short distance away. Some aviation writers have described the moment as one of the clearest demonstrations of modern stealth. So, can an airplane truly disappear? The answer is no. At least, not with the technology we know today. Every object leaves clues. Heat, sound, light, radio reflections, even the wake it leaves behind in the atmosphere. The goal of stealth has never been perfect invisibility. The goal is to make detection so difficult that by the time you're found, the mission is already over. But technology never stands still. Around the world, engineers are already working on the next chapter. Artificial intelligence is helping design aircraft that humans might never have imagined. New materials promise to absorb or redirect more energy. Radar systems continue to evolve. Some researchers are exploring quantum sensing. Others are improving networks that combine information from many different sensors at once. Whether these ideas will reshape aviation remains to be seen. But history suggests one thing: every breakthrough inspires another. Perhaps the greatest lesson of stealth has nothing to do with airplanes. Think back to the beginning of this story. Everyone believed survival depended on flying faster. They kept asking the same question: how do we build a better airplane? Then someone asked a different question: what if we're solving the wrong problem? That single change in perspective changed aviation forever. History is full of moments like this. Sometimes, progress doesn't begin with a new machine. It begins with a new question. Tonight, somewhere above the clouds, aircraft are flying that most of us will never see. Some have already been revealed. Others remain classified. And somewhere, engineers are sketching ideas that may seem impossible today, just as stealth once did. Perhaps the next revolution won't be faster engines or quieter aircraft. Perhaps it will begin with another forgotten equation, written by someone whose name the world has yet to learn. Because history has taught us something remarkable. Yesterday's fantasy can become tomorrow's engineering. The first engineers asked, how can we fly? Later generations asked, how can we fly faster? Then came a different question: how can we avoid being seen? Every era is remembered by the questions it dared to ask. So here's one final question. If you could build an aircraft without today's limits, what would you create? Maybe the future is already taking shape behind another locked door. This has been The Last Question.